Hello and welcome to another episode of Fishing for Answers. Today I'm here with James Phillips. As always, I like to start with an entertaining story. So have at it. Tell me a funny story that has to do with security awareness or fishing or something.
So this is almost a year ago or so. I was working at a company, and we had a new director of HR that just started day one on the job, and I get this frantic message, and it's saying, "Hey, did the CEO really ask me to buy gift cards?" I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. That's never going to happen." And then the immediate response back was, "Oh no," and I'm like,
They already bought
okay.
them.
What is oh no? Already, I was like, all right, did you already buy me? Yes. I'm like, okay. Let's. Then what happened? And it starts walking through me the whole scenario and everything else. It comes out. Not only did they buy the gift cards, they went as far as took the pictures, scratched off everything, sent them on everything. A few $1,000s in gift cards. The classic, text message scam. Hi, this is blah blah blah, the CEO. I am stuck in a client meeting and can't talk to you right now, but I have an urgent request, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
we've all seen those as long, but yeah, day one on the job, had it happened. And the irony of all this was the previous company they came from was a cybersecurity company.
Oh wow. Well, they should have done better or known better.
And so it kind of goes to show that, unfortunately, when somebody's under the gun, almost anybody can fall victim to something, right? And I get a little bit of the plight of that scenario, right? Because it's their first day. They hadn't gotten as far to even know what the CEO's phone number was. So it wasn't a red flag to be like, oh, well, this isn't their phone number, right? Why am I getting this strange number that couldn't be theirs? And it wasn't fortunate. It happened. It certainly was a learning scenario. Fortunately, the person did not last very long at the company either. There's some other reasons as well, but it was, it just goes to show that to me that, while it's a little comical and there's some irony that is kind of in there as well, that you almost can't keep up with how fast things are happening nowadays either, right? It just moves so quickly, and it's very easy for somebody to fall victim, especially, and I see it more in high pressure situations, right? The more the faster you work, the more pressure you're under, it seems like you're more susceptible because you don't have that chance to slow down and look at things and ask yourself those questions. She asked herself the questions. Unfortunately, it was a little late by the time she asked herself that question.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is still a little bit amazing to me that the gift card scam still works. It feels like if we've done anything and in terms of security awareness, that we should have at least got word out there that if there's ever a gift card involved, that it's it's malicious. But no, I see it all the time. But I've got a brother-in-law that falls for him like weekly. Um, but no, I do think it just goes to show that there's a really big gap between where we need to be and where we currently are. The fact that things like that do still happen, but you're absolutely right that when you're under the gun or under the pressure, people can fall for it. So tell us a
Oh,
little bit. Oh, go
I
ahead.
think it's a big reason that in that exact scenario that why a lot of these scammers out there that do that scam in particular, right? They're
Yeah.
going after those when they see your LinkedIn profile changed, you're consider yourself an immediate target, basically.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for those people that are like, oh, I just started. I need to impress my boss. I need to do this, right? They might not have gone through the company's security awareness training and everything else yet. So, it almost makes you have to almost recommend to a point of like, maybe you shouldn't update your LinkedIn profile till you've been on the job for like a couple months. And I've even just gone as far as recommending that the companies as part of the employee new start and stuff. Like, actually don't tell them to change it right away. Like, actually advise to put a pause in there.
Yeah, no, we actually have day one employee onboarding training that says, hey, beware of LinkedIn. And it talks about how the second they publish something on LinkedIn, they're a target. They've put a target on their back. You know what's interesting that I don't think as many people know is that just like those new employees get fished day one, so does the boss. And so I just, almost in unison with the new employee getting that text message or that smish. I typically get a smish or an email from the employee saying, "Hey, happy to be at the company. I actually just updated my payment information. Can you please update my account?" And so it's just as common that they're hitting them on the other side of that as
Oh yeah.
well. And that's why we have to educate our executives.
Well, I see it in to what you said. I see that happen quite often. More targeting the CFO, or if there's a chief people officer or a head of HR that they can find through LinkedIn or something along those lines, or in the company website, you name it, right? Similar, I've seen the text many times come through that says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I entered my direct deposit information incorrectly. Can you please change it to this?" Right?
Yeah.
That it's almost automatic at this point, that it's just, unfortunately, there's people just basically running algorithms out there that that's all they do, and just hope that they catch someone along the way, right?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that goes to one of those core points that everyone always talks about with fishing, that timing is everything.
Mhm.
If you catch me with the right thing at the right time, it's almost guaranteed that I'll click. And I think, having sent millions of phishing emails, I know how often I get perfect timing, and it's incredibly high. It's higher than you would think. And so it is really interesting how that timing works when you send that many. Even if you only hit it right 1% of the time, when you send a million, 1% is a lot, a huge victory. It's a lot of compromised machines for sure.
Well, I mean, yeah, like you just said, 1% on a million is 10,000 hits right then and there, right? So that's why these are done in such large masses, and you see them it happen in waves and chunks as well, too, right? Every company I have worked with, you'll see it. It's not one person in the company that gets it, right? I mean, yes, the
No,
new
no.
employee target, sure, but when they just try to do the generic against everybody, next thing you know, the inbox flood of coming in of people reporting those out. It's like, next thing you know, 40, 50, 60 people are all like, "I just got this, I just got this, I just got this," right? And um, so there's an aspect of the security awareness and the training and everything else you do, but fostering the culture as well, to make sure people aren't afraid to report it either. Creating quick feedback channels, whether you're using Slack or Teams or whatever you're using, like just having an area that somebody can ask that question immediately, and getting it in front of the right person to answer it back.
Yeah, no, no, I completely agree, and filling that safety is so critical. If the users feel like they'll be penalized if they say, "Hey, man, I clicked on that," they're not likely going to tell us, and that costs us more money, because that means the attackers are in our systems longer potentially, and the longer they're in there, typically the more damage that it gets done. So. Before we go any further, tell me a little bit about your background. What got you into cybersecurity in the first place?
Um, Accidental. Maybe that's the best way to put it. My career started out as, like as many in technology, right? I was initially more on the programming side, and let's just say quite a number of years ago, and we'll leave it at that number. And eventually got more on the data side, which mixed me into some networking and starting to learn a little bit more about that part of the world. And then I just really got very interested in it. I did some consulting back in the mid 2000s. Um, I got really interested in how to hack encryption, um, and
Ooh.
not for bad purposes, but to help companies out. Helping financial companies out, getting into fraud responses and things along those lines when fraud would be detected, and
Yeah.
then somebody had to figure out, like, well, how do you forensically go through a hard drive to figure out the whole trail of everything, right? Um, and that really just interested me. Now, I've always stayed in the data and analytics space, but that area interested me. And then when I got more into like leadership type roles and everything, it just kind of naturally went into that CIO kind of CISO suite for me. And I think it's that balance of I like AI and analytics and all that stuff, but I also really like security. And data and analytics and security kind of go hand in hand because most of the times, what are they after? They're after the data
Yeah.
because that's what's the valuable portion for everybody. So
Well,
that's kind of
and
how I wandered through there. And, now I do this more as a fractional basis and helping multiple companies out. So I went from that kind of full time role of always being at a single company into now trying to help more fractionally out of companies. And I know fractional is new to a lot of people. But the concept basically is for some reason, you don't have the need or resources, financial, whatever it might be, to have somebody full time in that role. I'm coming in to help step in, right?
yeah.
And why I don't call it consulting is because if you hire me as your fractional CISO, that's what I'm doing. I am your CISO. I just don't do it 40, 50, 60 hours a week.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so many companies need it. I don't think it's that they don't have a need. I think everyone has the need. They just don't necessarily have the budget or the
Yeah,
resources to devote to it. So,
I
you know,
agree. And that's the two common scenarios, the budgeting or they just lost somebody and they interim before the next hire.
well, and it's particularly like with these fast growth middle market companies, I would imagine you do really well because they often don't have any information security. IT was just done ad hoc and grew so quickly that it gets out of control. And next thing you know, you've got 500 employees with, no real solid technology plan, and it's a little bit of cleanup, but I would imagine that's sort of like your typical or ideal
It, it,
customer,
it's
right?
it's you would think being in 2024 you wouldn't come across that as often. Unfortunately, you absolutely do. You come across it quite a bit. To your point, quick growth, more
Yeah.
sales, market driven companies, and now all of a sudden IT's having to play the catch up game alongside of it, right? And unfortunately, sometimes those calls come in because it is, hey, we think we actually might have already been breached.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, yeah, and when they do, that's always a race because one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize is that if you wait until you've been ransomed to call us, uh, we now have a figurative gun to our head where if we don't quickly triage your risk and clean it up, they're coming back in and ransoming you again
Yeah.
in 45 to 90 days. In fact,
Well,
the quickest I've seen it is 41 days. 41 days later, they were trying to come back in and re-ransom.
Well, yeah, because they know enough now about your network and everything else that they know what to target, right? They know what firewalls you're running, they know what operating systems you're
Oh
running. If
yeah,
they've gotten to that point, now what it is, they're not randomly trying to attack you anymore. Now they're at the point of going, we now know what to targetedly actually go after.
yeah,
And it's a tough conversation, especially to have with, the executive side of the house sometimes, the CEOs and things on those, of saying, the best thing to do for you right now is literally shut your platform down.
yeah.
And that doesn't go over very well quite often. But the easiest way to minimize everything right then and there and get you actually fully back up and operational with the least amount of risk is to be like, we're going to shut you down right now.
Yeah, I mean
Communicate
that's
to your
what has
customers,
to be
communicate to your
done.
clients. We're shutting down.
Yeah, no, I mean it's so often what has to be done there. So, completely agree. Switching subjects a little bit, or sort of changing the direction here. Carrot or stick, and why?
Ooh, um, that is a great question. It's a hard one there, actually. It's a little bit of a mix to me, right? Because there has to be, I think, a certain aspect of the stick, absolutely. Because for my experience tells me is that you have to force it a little bit, and you have to really push it and make certain things just be mandatory, and it has to be pushed all the way down from every executive level to the important side of it. Now, there certainly is a little bit of the carrot in there too, right? Is that because we all know if there isn't something there, and I've seen this at companies. I advised at a company, and I came to find out that they would have one person in the department take the awareness training and screen record the entire thing and share it with the rest of the team so they could just go straight to the test and click the answers. So what have they learned at that time? Nothing. It's just they've just been like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. We have to do so many of these and everything else, right? And so you have to figure a little bit of a balance out there, especially when you're dealing with employees and mass, right? Um, is because, but that's been a little bit of stick. Like you have to be willing, and I've seen so many companies struggle with this. If you don't do the training, if you don't do certain actions, that you're going to terminate their access. And you have to be willing to actually not just say it and then get to the end and be like, oh, well, let's give you 15 more days. Let's give you 30 more days. Right? That's be like, if you set that line there, it's going to be no, if you don't do it by this point, we are turning your account access off. Like, and guess what? Salespeople, like you turn it off, they can't get in their Salesforce and everything else anymore. They can't book sales. Well, now it's an income affecting problem for them as well too. So I
Yeah.
think it's a balance. You have to entice a little bit because I think people are a little tired of it. I think you have to gamify it a little bit sometimes too. I don't think there's anything wrong with that inside of organizations. But you also have to be willing at the same time to say that this is the consequences as well, and this is what things that you just have to do. Um, and a lot of companies, I've been involved with several recently that have gotten caught. And what I mean by that is they've got ransomware, they've got something has happened, and they've certified everything, right? That's, oh, we're SOC compliant and we're ISO and we got all of this. And yes, we do all of these things. And in the end, you come to find out that they didn't, right?
Well, and even if they did, compliance is the starting line. It's the minimum set of standards, and
Yeah.
it's so often treated as if it's the finish line. It's the goal. It's the the holy grail. No, that's best practices, and so no, I mostly agree. I definitely think that you have to be willing to use the stick, but I think that it's the carrot that really drives change. And it's that old adage. You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, and
Yeah.
it's true even in our programs. I do think though that the you can't patch stupid mentality is impacting that in a negative, and creating almost an adversarial
Mhm.
relationship between infosec and the average user. What do you think? I mean, is that something you'd agree
Oh,
with?
it's an absolute struggle and challenge. In the last full time role that I was in, it became very adversarial, um, and it was a very difficult thing because when you don't have full buy in from the entire organization, and unfortunately, that was one of the scenarios I was in at this point in time. It almost creates that adversarial scenario, right? I'm in there saying, all right, everybody can't have access to the database anymore, and everybody can, this, and we're starting to peel things back and get those best practices and everything else. But then the second something slows somebody's day to day job down just a little bit, it was turning it into like World War III was starting all of a sudden, and that I see that way too often still to this day of just like not everybody's bought in on it from the top level. And when that happens, that's when that adversarial situation always seems to pop up because they want to be like, oh, it's the security people making me do this. My job's harder to do rather than, and instead of just embracing and adjusting, it's just fight it all the way through and not want to implement those changes. Um,
Yeah.
it took, unfortunately, at one place I was with, an actual breach event to occur before somebody finally went, "Oh, this is why they're saying we can't do all this stuff."
Yeah, unfortunately, that's all too often that that happens. I also think though that part of the resistance is that we're not entertaining the users enough. And I say that because I feel it's almost a responsibility when we get to training. It's as boring as possible. It's as dry as possible. It's even the short training is long. And what I mean by that is, like, I've watched some of the shorter training videos,
Yeah.
and it often feels you know, like they can turn 5 minutes into an hour, if that makes sense. Um,
No, it
I
does.
I think, we live in a TikTok society, and I think it's impacting everyone's attention spans. And in order to be successful, we really have to. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Got my phone ringing everywhere on me. But it seems to me that because we live in this, TikTok society, our attention spans are shorter, and in order to really capture the audience, we almost have to embrace a more continuous, short format type approach to training.
You almost do, and we found a comical one, almost, that we started using a little bit. Right, it was more cartoony-ish and everything else, um, and it had this little character called Dee Dee in it, and but it was interesting because it was shorter form, and to your point, shorter form meaning maybe each thing was 8 to 10 minutes long. A little bit better than some of the things that we had dealt with in the past, but the cartoony nature of it and some of the weird scenarios that were the way that they had put it all together, it actually got to the point when, like, it was coming up time to start the next round of process, next year renewals, everything else. All right, we got to do this some more and everything else. We're going to redo this. It was interesting to watch the employees actually, like, oh, it's DD time again, right? And it almost became like a little bit of a joke and everything else of, like, uh-oh, stealing our ice cream, here we go again and everything. And I think that helped a little bit, though, to your point, right? It was more short. It had a little playful nature to it. It wasn't just somebody sitting in front of a PowerPoint and clicking slides and a monotone voice, Charlie Brown kind of situation, kind of going through there and talking. And it helped. Did we still deal with the issue of you get near the deadline and you're just like, yep, we're still at, like, in the 50% of number of employees that have completed this, and you're just hammering home like, hey, deadline's coming, deadline's coming. It still happens, but it seemed like people at least were enjoying it a little bit more. There was the issue there we were dealing with was still more around, and you see this often, is that, but they're like, I got a day job I got to do, and then this is just extra on top of it. And that's a mentality overall organizations got to change, right? They got to be like, no, like, hey, you need an hour or whatever to go do what you need to do and to do this, and it's during the day and everything. Like, encouraging that to happen, is otherwise I still see it happen. Like, getting near the deadline, you're still 30% shy, and you start watching everything come in, and it's 7, 8 o'clock at night on the last couple days, and everybody's still doing it, right? You've got to invest and be willing as an organization to say, this is something that we're not just doing to check a box. We're doing it to make our organization safer, to make our data safer. And it's something that you're encouraging to say, hey, you this is part of your work day. This is part of the job, part of the work day. You take the time out, block your calendar, whatever you need to do. Tell people don't schedule over that, when you see it on their calendar either.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, but I think that really the most important element there is that top down leadership. When the CEO says, "Listen, I care about security, and here's why," that does really filter down through the company. But when you have, the alternate, where you have key executives that are apathetic, that filters through the company too. And so, it really is a collaboration or a partnership between information security, communications, and the C suite to create an effective security awareness program that actually drives that culture change that we're all going after, right?
And you said the key thing there. It's the culture change, right? And that's what this is all about. It's making it part of the culture of, that we feel our customers' information is important. We feel that our information is important, and important enough that we're driving home to say that you need to be conscious about the actions and the activities that can occur that can put this data at risk.
Yeah,
And
100%.
I remember years ago having a conversation when cloud was first just coming about, right? And all you kept hearing over and over again, I just don't feel like cloud's secure. I don't feel like cloud's secure. And you heard that constantly. And I remember sitting in a room with a CTO at the time, and I just said, "Why do you not feel it's secure?" And they went through a bunch of reasons, everything else, and I was just like, "But you realize whether it's Google, whether it's AWS, whether it's Microsoft, it really doesn't matter. If their cloud ever got compromised, you realize that they're pretty much out of business. If you don't think they're putting all their baskets into security and making sure that that is secure, you're crazy, because
Yeah,
you're talking about billions of dollars of business would be gone in a like that."
and we're talking B2B, because if the Google, Amazon, Microsoft clouds went down and were fully compromised, just about every technology company in the world would be going after their throats. I mean, day one, they'd have
Oh yeah.
millions of lawsuits against them. Millions. I can't
So yeah,
imagine.
and when you talk with, I think I've had opportunity to talk with people that were at the forefront in a lot of these different, whether it's private cloud, public cloud offerings, and everything else. Like, everybody started out with that culture of security is the most important thing we can do from the start.
It has to be built in from the ground up. It's so much more expensive later. Speaking of building in security from the ground up, that's actually a great segue to role-based training. One of the things that I see a lot more talk about lately is role-based training. We've got CMMC, saying, hey, you need to train people according to their role now. For all of our level 2 defense contractors or cleared defense contractors. We've got PCI saying, hey, you need to do some role-based training. So the standards in the industry are finally starting to catch up, but we're really only seeing just a few roles defined. From your perspective, what are the different roles that we should be considering as we build out more and more role-based training?
So I think you have to get a little fine grain in those roles, and this is something that a lot of my background was in financial services type area. That's where I spent a good portion of my career, and it's something that I think role based training has been around in that sector a little bit longer. It may not have been part of the frameworks, so to speak. It's not what the FDIC was saying and everything else, but it's what they were already doing. And so, even in the role of your developer engineering part of your organization, right? And different organizations call them different names, but the different responsibilities of the role of a junior to an engineer one to a senior, an architect, all of those different, they're going to need different training. And you should be designing your training around those different roles. Different levels of customer support is going to need different levels of role based training, because typically in most organizations, right, what your level 1 customer support person has access to is most likely different than what the director or senior manager is going to have access to. Because of that, you need to base the training to be around those roles as well too, because what works for the level 1 is probably not going to cover what somebody else has greater access to. And understanding, like, it's great you have access to it, but you know what, the right thing still isn't to like query this data and download it and put it in an Excel file that is locally on your computer, and then you walk around with that computer and you leave it in your car at some point and somebody steals it, and next thing you know, oh, we just lost all our customer data, right? I've seen that way too many times. And some of that is a consequence of the right training wasn't there. And based on the different roles, it's something I'm actually working with somebody on right now around some database best practices around just querying data and what you do about and downloading it, things along those lines, it to kind of take it to that next level inside of an organization as well too. So I think all throughout your organization, you need to look at not at the different verticals, from customer success to your infrastructure management, to your sales organizations, to your HR, and HR is a whole nother world, but finance and everything else. But then the individual roles and levels of access should have customized training to them.
I couldn't agree more. Actually, we do a lot of that at Fish Firewall. We believe in, developers need that training. Customer support needs the training about how they're going to be pretext all the time. You've got all these different critical roles. So that's great. So I guess from that, AI is I know it's not a great segue, but AI is reshaping everything for us right
Mhm.
now, right? And it has its positives and it has its negatives. So let's start on the good side of AI. What do you think AI is going to do to enhance cybersecurity over the next 5 years?
I think it's going to be able to be ingrained and embedded in all of our, you know, our, our our entry points, whether it's email, whether it's text messaging, whether it is um, in your firewalls and in your application firewalls and everything else, right? I think there's a ton of opportunity there to be able to process and detect anomalies and patterns and everything else way faster than a human being's ever going to do, right? EDR, MDR, and all that type of stuff has been a big push over these last few years, and it's great. MDR is great from the aspect of being able to outsource, it and everything, and have more people at it. But what AI is going to be able to do, and the positive side of this is, I think, be able to detect these things and shut them down before it ever hits a human. So I think that's the positive side of it. I don't know of a single vendor out there right now that's not in that space that isn't exploring exactly that right now.
Oh, absolutely. And
So
and from
there's a lot
all
of
kinds of
positive.
different angles.
Now the the catch 22 of this is the positive always lags the negative, and that's what we've been seeing with AI for the last several years, right? The bad actors figure out how to use it first before it can get commercialized and embedded into products, and there's a lot of ethical AI things that are very top of mind for me right now. With OpenAI's model and preview right now with O1, I mean, I think there needs to be a huge call for limited access to that. It is extremely powerful. And I think the bad actors should get way ahead of anything that could positively happen in that realm if it's left to wide open, unfederated access that is not going through some sort of check and balance first.
Oh, I already have it integrated into my Kali Linux terminal, so I think you might be right about that. So,
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, I don't know if you saw the everything that broke over the weekend with the capture the flag scenario and everything else, right? I mean, let's just face it, because of the nature of regulatory and everything else, for vendors to get this into there and test it and QA and everything else, they just can't keep up with, because let's face it, bad actors don't QA anything, right? They just shoot it out. Does it work? Yes, no, nope. Shift next thing, right?
well, and it's not even just that. The bad actors have unlimited budgets. I mean, they just go ransomware somebody and pulling 5 million, and it's not like the ethical companies that have to grow responsibly have
No,
to have limited resources where if I'm a criminal actor, I can throw as many people at it as I need to because it's the amount of effort it takes to ransomware somebody is minimal. And I used to run some of the top red teams in the country, worked for the FDIC, the SEC, on their red teams, as well as some places like Cigna,
yep,
in my career, and so one of the things that has always stood out to me is how short of a time window we typically had. Most of our assessments were 8 days, start to finish, and in that 8 days, there was almost never a time where we weren't able to get domain admin. And I know everyone is like, well, our XDR, our EDR can block everything, but really it doesn't. I mean, all the attackers are doing is using a side loader to bypass those, and still very effectively able to run their malware inside a network. So, it's it stands out to me that it doesn't take long. And so, imagine these organizations, if they just have, one person can pop a new organization every 8 days. What if you have 100 people working on it, right? That's absolute insanity. And so,
and
yeah,
and, and that's the scary part. It's the speed of now what some of these models and everything else and leveraging them or what they're able to do. And that's where the scary factor comes in a little bit, right? But at the same time, there's an absolute capability of the good side's going to catch up too. Like I don't doubt that. I know they're all out there looking at it and everything else. It's just we've seen it time and time again with every new model that has come out in the AI space over the last couple of years. The bad side figures it out first, and then things catch up later, right? And
yeah.
it's a pattern we just keep seeing, and this is where, like, I've had so many conversations the last few days over ethical AI, and my initially, if you asked me a year ago, I probably wouldn't feel as strong as I feel about it today. But right now, I think there absolutely needs to be a call, especially to the OpenAI organization, to say not everybody can have access to this. Like I know that they're trying to maximize value and profit and everything else inside their organization. I get that aspect of it, but at what cost? Um, don't like to get in the political realm or anything else, but I look at some of the stuff that has happened between AI and everything else and inflation, and there's some correlation in here from the purely just for nothing more of when companies have got to pay out all this crazy money, the consumer pays for it at some point in time.
Yeah. Oh, agreed. The consumer is always the one that ends up footing the bill for these types
And we
of
have seen such a skyrocket in ransomware attacks and the dollars associated with them over these last few years. I mean, we went from, and I should have wrote this down because I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but you go back a few years, we were talking about in the realms of a few $100 million is what ransomware was costing companies. We're into the billions of dollars now at this point of what ransomware is costing a company each year. So where's that money coming from? Who's paying for it?
Yeah, and the other really scary part is, what about the company who wants to pay the ransom but can't? So I think a lot of people are finding out about, the Department of Treasury and terror, organizations that are listed as terrorist organizations, the hard way, because they get there and they realize they cannot pay because it would be a crime because they're supporting a terrorist organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another part that's maybe not as understood. Maybe within our ranks, we understand it. But as you get into just even the average C-suite, I would think doesn't have a general knowledge of that.
No, I mean, I think the average C-suite doesn't even have a general knowledge of like reporting requirements around when a ransomware attack actually occurs, right? And and depending on what you're doing as a company, and sometimes it's not even just what you're doing as a company. It's like, who are your customers and what realms are they in? That if something does happen, you might end up having to report it to 10 different agencies about what actually ended up happening.
Oh, and you're going to have a bunch of follow-up meetings with each of
Oh yeah.
those 10 different agencies. Pivoting a little bit, still on AI, how do you think that AI is going to impact security awareness?
So this is an area I've actually been playing with a little bit myself, and I've actually had AI generate some security awareness training, and it's through some different tools that are out there, from creating presentations and now can generate videos and all these other things. Like how fast you can actually get content to train people. The window is shortening
Agreed.
in multitudes at this point in time, right? You can, because all you gotta do is feed it in like a bunch of news articles and everything else about security breach X, right? and literally just basically say, okay, now let's generate a training based around all of this. And you can start turning things out and have content back in people's hands in sometimes a matter of just a few days. You're not waiting weeks and you have to have content creators and everything else all involved to put this stuff together anymore. You're able to turn around very, very quickly. And I think eventually what it's going to do is it's going to start getting to more in the realm of being more proactive as well. You're going to be able to write algorithms to just say monitor this and monitor 0-day threats and everything else, and just start pumping out. Maybe it's not full on training, but pumping out information to your organization. Hey, this exists. This is how it can be breached. This is what we need to be watching out for, and getting more proactively out in front of it.
Well, I think even finding or predictive analysis, like, hey, this person's about to relapse. Let's capture that click so the bad guys don't.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree. I think that one of the things that we're doing is really using AI to customize to the individual. Imagine if you had a team of people running your training and they were able to work with each person on an individual basis and customize training to them and customize coaching to each individual. I think that's where AI is going to really allow us to sort of have that force multiplier where we can still have that human in the loop and have that human connection, but have that human be a little bit more AI empowered.
Mhm.
And to where they can do a million things at once and do the job of 1,000 people, but one person, or even less, potentially just an AI. And so I definitely see that. What do you think?
Well, I do, and I also think it gets into our day to day tooling, right? We've seen it's Microsoft started some of the Copilot stuff. We're starting to see the Gemini stuff now in the Google suites and everything else, and what that's going to leverage is the fact that the data is already going to be being consumed of how everybody is working and communicating on a day to day basis, right? So that when your point, we're trying to deliver customized solutions out to be maybe an individual. Well, all of that context of how they're actually working on a day to day basis becomes extremely important, right? And if they work a certain way in their email and how they work their email queues and things along those lines, right? You're going to be able to leverage that to be able to deliver a training to them based on how they actually work in their day to day basis. So organizations need to start becoming a little less fearful of, oh my gosh, I'm not turning that on because that violates this weird rule that we've got about utilizing AI, right?
Yeah.
And starting to realize that these companies have invested, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft, and your data is being stored in a secure way that is only your data, it's not being mixed in with anybody else, and start becoming more ready to adapt that to get to exactly what you were just talking about. Because to deliver that customized training in a way that's going to resonate to them, you need to know how they work, how they interact with people. What are they susceptible to based on that? If I'm delivering a training that's talking about somebody who's trying to, connect through, text messages or something, and the person's not a texter, well, guess what? Is that really relevant to them?
Yeah.
Probably not. And it's going to go in one ear out the other, and you should have been talking to them about something else.
I completely agree, and it's really going to be interesting to see where AI goes over the next few years. I definitely think it's a tool that's not going away. I know that people have thought that AI was going to take over the world since 1968 or something like that. When they first beat the world checkers champion, and then the world chess champion, and then again, and we thought that AI was taking over a lot of times. But truly this time, I think it is. And it's not going to be that it's eliminating our jobs. I think it's that it empowers people, and the people that are going to do really well with AI are the ones that learn how to utilize it to make them and their teams more productive. And the ones that are going to, maybe be hurt by this AI wave are the ones that just decide not to learn it. I think it's an unavoidable part of nearly everyone's job. I even imagine, augmented reality solutions for field technicians where, hey, you may be a little bit, more blue collar, but you're still going to be using AI in your day-to-day life to analyze, identify what's wrong and fix it more quickly. So,
Well, and I think that's the difference to what you're saying is that also then accepting the limitations. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn nowadays because that seems to be the one content platform you can still reach a whole lot of people in. It's not as bifurcated and everything else and fractioned as some of the other platforms have certainly become over the last few years. But one of the interesting things about it has been is like you either have people that are totally pro AI or people are like, see, I told you it doesn't work because they found some weird use case that goes, see, it told me the wrong number R's in strawberry, right? And that's the problem is you have to accept what can it do for you and also accept what it can't do for you. And it's going to advance things it can't do now. It's going to be things it can do another 6 months from now as well, too. But and then accepting as an organization on how AI ready are you really? It as well too, and that's something that I've been working quite a bit with organizations more recently. It's just come in and be like, all right, are you really ready for AI? Yes or no, and coaching them towards how to actually use it to help their organization and help their business. But yeah, in the cybersecurity realm, I think that's where you're going to see some of the largest advancements over the next 6 months. Let's call it 6 to 12 months, probably, really, just because of how long it takes to get some of this stuff to the market. But that's where I actually think some of the biggest ROI is going to come from in the next 6 to 12 months. There's a lot of stuff already out there to cover other scenarios, right? With chat bots and your websites and helping customer teams out and everything else. But the cybersecurity realm it's prime at this point in time, and that's why
yeah.
I mean you see it as well. You talk to everybody in that space that's a vendor; they're all putting heavy resources into getting it embedded into their solutions.
Oh yeah, we've been in this AI space for years now, and in the last 12 months, it has just skyrocketed more than I've really ever seen before. Um, so, we've talked about AI, how that's going to impact things. We've talked about carrots versus sticks. We've talked a little bit about role-based training. Um, what do you have any soapboxes, if you will, that are pet peeves inside of security awareness that just bother you? I know I do. Mine
Right.
is the whole "you can't patch stupid" mentality. It's a pet peeve of mine. I wish I never heard that again. But what's your soapbox?
So it's interesting you say that, and we touched on it a little bit. I think there's two soapboxes really for me. The first one is the company culture around it, and companies that don't make it part of their culture. And I think there's a direct correlation to me. It's been proven over and over. Companies that don't make it part of their culture are the ones that have the events, plain and simple. Now, there's other factors too with large organizations that they just become targets of too many people trying to go after them that just want to take them down. But when you talk about the medium sized businesses out there, it's the ones that have not adopted it, that have not become a secure organization. They're the ones that end up, the ones that have as ransomwares or just pure out data breaches or anything else. They're the ones that are most susceptible. And the CEOs, the COOs, you name it out there, you got to partner with your CISO side of your organization. And you need to start making it that it's a cultural thing. And to your point, you got to put little carrots. You got to make some things fun about it too, right? Um, Make things a little competitive. I remember in the last full time role I was in, I was sending messages out to my team like, hey, like, let's make this a contest. I want to be the one celebrating. We were the first ones to get 100% of our team like to complete this, right? And if
Nice.
we do like it's something silly like, hey, we're gonna, we were a virtual team in a lot of realms, so it was like, all right, we're gonna do like here, I'm gonna give you DoorDash gift cards to everybody or something along those lines too. Sometimes it's just silly, some of the things you do around it. Um, that's definitely one of my soapboxes. The other one and this is an unfortunate reality. And you said you can't fix stupid, so to speak. But I think you also have to do a reality that with different generations, the concepts and the levels of where common sense exists is different, and you have to accept that. I there's plenty of times I've shaken my head like, how did you fall victim to that? It seems common sense to me that you just would not do that, right? Unfortunately, fr- from every different segment across, from the elderly all the way down to probably our own kids that are just to today, like the level of different common sense is just not there. And you know, I actually wish schools would focus more on cybersecurity a little bit and educating our children as they're actually going through and partnering with organizations and companies to bring that training to start it at a very young age, because this isn't going away.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about the same thing in 20 years from now. What we're talking about is going to be different, but the fact that this is still going to be around and cybersecurity is an issue, that's not going away anytime soon. And I think the more we educate earlier, just as a culture, is actually then the more aware people are going to be, and less scams that we're going to see that actually are successful.
Yeah, 100%. We actually recently worked with cyber.org to create a bunch of K-12 content with a large portion of the really common sense stuff being aimed at, kids as early as second grade. Who are you going to meet online? What do you do in gaming chat rooms? The basics so that they don't fall victim or fall prey to predators. And so it's yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We have to have more of that. I will say, at least at the federal level, politics aside, they do seem to be trying to push that. There are grants and organizations through DISA that are pushing those things. So it is nice to see, but we're only beginning to scratch the surface of something that should already be comprehensive. And I think that's part of the problem, is that we are so far behind. It's insane. And I don't know where other countries fall there, but I can't imagine that we're leading the world in that regard, because we're just not doing enough yet.
No, no, I've
Uh,
seen, and we're not unique either from our country alone either. I've seen it in others, or they got the same problem. That this isn't a U.S.
I'll
only
bet.
problem by any means, right? The scams and everything else, and who falls victim to this. This is a worldwide issue. I think we hear about it a lot more in U.S. culture, more just for U.S. as a bigger target. I think overall from different countries from around the world. And there's just it also has to do with wealth capital, and you're going to go where the money is, and when you're going after this stuff as well. So
True.
inevitably, we're going to be probably always be a little bit higher target, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think, Americans tend to be little less security aware, and they get it naturally. I mean, if you look at history, the threat hasn't been on our doorstep until computers brought it to our living room, and so in recent history, war has always been this thing that's elsewhere in the world, that's not right here. Whereas if you go to other countries like Israel, their entire populace is very security aware,
Mhm.
because war has been on their doorstep their whole lives, their whole existence. And so I do think that some of the good of that creates this negative where people have this over or enlarged sense of security, where this false sense of security, I guess, that really isn't true.
Yeah, and I am a victim of the can't sleep at night and scroll through TikTok type of person, and unfortunately, yeah, I do it myself. And one of the ones that I actually enjoy watching is the TikTok series of basically reverse hacking the hackers, right? And then like listening into their phone calls and actually trying to then reach out to a victim to let them know they are being scammed right there in that time. That's an area that I'd like to see grow more. And I think there's growth opportunities. I know there's individuals kind of out there doing it now, but I do think that's an area there's some growth opportunity out there as well to be like to go on the offensive a little bit as well too, and to create ways to warn people that hey, this might be happening to you right now. You might be being scammed.
Yeah, there's a reason I keep my account information in a PDF. But jokes aside, no, I completely agree. I'm really big fan of that type of content. So those of you out there, if you're listening, keep it up. We love it. Big fans. Um, Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. That's it for this episode. Stick with me afterwards, but I'm going to end the stream.